Welcome into Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. Today on the show, will the starters be the downfall? Injury leads to opportunity, and two names we're not hearing. It's all next. It's Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.
This is Hittin Hard with Jon Chuckery, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
Hittin Hard is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We ask you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Get the latest episodes of Hittin Hard as soon as they become available. Also, check us out on the SiriusXM app and follow me on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. Well, in Pittsburgh last night, the Braves got off to another rough start as, Spencer Strider was the latest starting pitcher to not exactly have his best outing. Strider went 2 2/3 innings, 5 hits, 6 earned runs with 3 walks and 3 strikeouts. Good news is he did not give up a home run, which has been his bugaboo this year, but 63 pitches where now his ERA has climbed up to 3.94. And this is just kind of symptomatic of some of the latest problems for the Atlanta Braves. As we talked about Elder yesterday, Morton has bounced up and down a little bit. Obviously, we're trying to figure out the back end of the rotation. We feel like Max Fried, and this is why this is so important, that he is a consistent starter in this rotation. But I'll say again, the message I said yesterday, and I'll say it again today. This is not about the division. This is not about can we win the division. This is all about, are we winning the World Series? It's World Series or bust, folks. There's nothing short of that goal. If it's not a World Series championship, then this is a disappointing year. It is. I don't want to hear about divisions. I don't want to hear about, we played really well. I don't want to hear about moral victories. I don't want to hear about anything can happen in a short series. I don't want to hear about any of that kind of stuff. This team is way too good. And if the starting pitching is the downfall, and again, we saw this last year where you thought you had a pretty good rotation, right? Wright and Fried and Morton and Strider and all these guys. And then it got to be where, Fried was sick and, he was under the weather, and Strider was coming back from injury, and all these different things that happened. And it was a bounce out from the Philadelphia Phillies. And it shouldn't be that way this year. This team is too good, especially offensively. They're too good. But, we've seen better Braves teams or comparable Braves teams in the past that their offense has been shut down. Look, that 2003 team, we talk about it, that's the gold standard for the Braves organization. The most runs in the modern era, the 100-homer, 400-plus RBI outfield. And what happened when they got against Pryor and Wood? Sheffield, Chipper, Andrew, that whole team as a whole, they flamed out. Couldn't do anything against Pryor and Wood. Sheffield was especially bad. I think he had 3 hits and 19 at bats or something crazy like that. I mean, it was rough all the way around. Good pitching shut down, good hitting at that point. And the Braves, sauntered off, and they were not to be heard from again that year. So this team is too good to have starting pitching be an issue. And I understand that they are relying on, because of injury, lots of young guys. I mean, say what you will about Strider, but again, he's still a very young guy. Obviously, Elder is in his first real season this year. He only pitched, 54 innings or something like that, in the past. Morton obviously is a guy who's the wily veteran, but he has his issues at times too. Fried has really been kind of that one solid rock. Again, 6 starts, only twice has he given up a run. And I know it's a really small sample size. And for all of those that are saying about, when we get Kyle Wright back, okay, well, what tells you that A, Kyle Wright is coming back anytime soon, B, that he's going to be up to speed in a quick hurry, or C, the idea of, he's just going to come in there and he's going to be lights out for our rotation. Can't have too much starting pitching. And I don't want this to be the downfall of the Braves. I don't want this to be the thing that ends up costing them at the end of the day. They have too much talent, and even their starting pitching has a tremendous amount of talent. Like their starting pitching, Elder's an all-star, Strider's the leader for the Cy Young in the clubhouse. Morton is obviously a very capable pitcher. Max Fried is the best left-hander in baseball. Kyle Wright won 20 games last year. But all that could just be mishmash and just kind of go away at the end of the day. If you can't find a good group of starters. And look, Ian Anderson is out. He was your best pitcher a couple of years ago when winning the World Series. It's still a battle of just trying to find some consistency night in, night out. And I'm not asking for consistency last night against the LA Dodgers or, the Houston Astros or the Texas Rangers. I'm asking for some consistency against the Pittsburgh Pirates, who stink. And let's face it, the Pirates are another one of those dreadful organizations and dreadful ball clubs. They're not a very good team. And you allow the Pirates to put a 7 spot up on you. And Strider's giving, 6 runs up. And look, Strider's had some really good starts here of late, but and the thing that's, been his downfall has been just too many home runs given up. And then he doesn't give up home runs last night. And again, he gets beat around. They were hitting doubles off him. They weren't hitting balls out of the ballpark, but they were hitting doubles off him. And again, I'll say this for the 8,000th time. This is not about winning the division. Well, you complain because they're winning. Because again, we know that they're going to win the division. I'm the first guy that told you about winning the division. I'm the first guy that went all hot takey like Sal Lipskitz and all that stuff and told you that they're winning the division. That's been a foregone conclusion. Again, the Mutts and the Philadelphia Phillies and the Fishnets, none of those teams are going to catch the Braves. But this is about playoff baseball. This is about making sure you've got the horses to get you through 11 wins in the playoffs and winning the World Series. They had a magical run with their pitching a couple years ago or a few years ago, whatever it is, when they had that World Series run. And Ian Anderson was a big part of that, and Max Fried. But again, when I watch this team at times, you think to yourself, okay, why are we struggling against the Pirates and things like that? And I understand, guys, we're getting to that point of the year where, for Elder, for Strider, they're pitching a lot more, right? They're having to shoulder a lot more of the load. But I just don't want it to be a situation like last year where we go through the division, and obviously last year we had to expend a lot of our ammunition just to get to the divisional title, right? But once you got to the playoffs, then it was like, all right, you expended a lot of your energy and you just didn't have a lot left. I don't want that to be that way this year. This ball club is too good. They're too dominant, and they have too much talent on this club. So I hope that the starting pitching isn't the real downfall of this team. Again, Strider is the leader in the clubhouse for the Cy Young. Elder's had a really good season. He's an all-star. Max Fried is the best left-hander in baseball. Charlie Morton is a 200 strikeout pitcher, even at 40 years old. There's a lot to like about this starting staff, but at the same time, I worry about, okay, can we get it done against not the Pirates, not the Mutts, not the Nationals, not the Padres. I worry about, can we get it done against the Dodgers and the Brewers and different teams like that at the top of the National League, and then eventually, the Rays or Rangers or whoever in it. I just want this team to, again, make sure that they have all of their bases covered, because this team is too good not to win the World Series. That's why they're the overwhelming favorite. That's why they're on FanDuel, the betting favorite, the overwhelming favorite to be the World Series champion. Why? Because they've been so dominant this year. We'll see what happens, but I certainly don't want starting pitching to be the bugaboo for this team. All right, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Speaking of which, as you're betting on Major League Baseball, FanDuel has got you covered where you can get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets. That's right, up to $200. So you can bet $20 on FanDuel and get yourself $200 in bonus bets, whether you win or whether you lose. That's $200 that you can spend on everything from betting the money line to over-unders to who's going to hit the first home run. And obviously with FanDuel, it's a safe, secure, super easy-to-use app. Most importantly, though, is, and this is the best part, when you win, they pay you instantly. So you don't have to wait around for your money. You get instant payment when you win. No better place to bet on Major League Baseball than on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So head over today to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON and get $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn, FanDuel.com/LOCKEDON. FanDuel is the official partner of Major League Baseball. So injury leads to opportunity. So as we know, Jeff Okudah, which they got good news, by the way, too, over the weekend about Jeff Okudah and the idea that he's going to be back early in the season. And Arthur Smith was not specific with the timeline because he doesn't really know at this point, right? I mean, again, we know he's not going to be ready for the preseason, but certainly week 1, week 2, week 3. I mean, he said, look, it'll be sometime early in the season. But I'm looking at this as injury is creating opportunity because here's the thing. If Jeff Okudah balls out, there's a definite chance that as he becomes a free agent, he could leave this club. Like he could get paid way too much money to stay with the Atlanta Falcons. Or again, he might want to stay with this team. I don't know what his plans are or whatever like that. But if he flames out, he can't stay healthy. Or if he balls out and becomes a top tier corner, you know, there's a definite chance that he could be with another team come next year or not on this team. I mean, again, with the 1-year contract. So you need to look at what you've got available. And I'll tell you, I like Clark Phillips. I want to see what he can do as a starting corner. Let's throw him out there and see what he can do in the preseason. And I'm not asking him to start during the regular season and be an impact player and all this kind of stuff. And we know that there are things about him, the size limitations and stuff like this. It's not about necessarily his talent, not about his ball skills or different things like that, but size is certainly a factor at his height and going up against bigger, better wide receivers and such. But let's see what we have on some of these defensive backs. You know, I want to see Mike Hughes on the outside. I can afford to see Trey Flowers on the outside. Trey Flowers has been the guy who's pretty much been running with the ones as Jeff Okudah has been out. You know, Trey Flowers has been lining up with the ones. He's had experience. But let's see Mike Hughes. Let's see Clark Phillips and some of these guys. I hope that we see kind of a round robin of what we have at cornerback without Jeff Okudah and what life could look like moving forward, you know, without him. Again, I want Okudah to succeed. I hope he gets healthy and he comes back. And I hope he balls out. I hope he plays lights out in his contract year. And I hope he gets paid a ton of money. And hopefully if he balls out, he gets paid by the Atlanta Falcons to come in and be their number 2 corner to go along with A.J. Terrell. I hope all of that happens. But you better have a contingency plan, right? And this is an opportunity for some guys to step up and see what they have. I don't mind seeing a mixture of Flowers, Hughes, Clark Phillips. I don't mind seeing a D. Alford, you know, another guy that let's see what he can do on the outside. Like, let's find out what we have in some of these guys. You know, I think Alford's a nice player. He's a good rotational piece to bring into the mix. Let's see what we have if he can stay on the outside. Let's see Clark Phillips play some outside and line up against some guys. Can he stand on the other side of a, you know, top cornerback? I mean, I want to see these kinds of things out of this group of defensive backs because the reality is there may be some, you know, changes when we get through this year Phillips will be with the team. There's a definite chance that D. Alford, depending on how he plays, would be with the team. Mike Hughes, we don't know about. Jeff Okudah, obviously, there's big question marks. So let's see what we have in some of these guys. Trey Flowers, just kind of a rotational piece. Again, he's got experience. He's got starting experience. I kind of know what he is probably at this point. But let's see what some of these other guys are. Mike Hughes is a former first-round pick who's, whether it's bad coaching, whether it's been underused, whatever like that, let's see what we have in some of these guys. So again, injury leads itself to opportunity. And I'm embracing the idea of guys playing a lot in this preseason that maybe normally wouldn't get as much time to play, or certainly throwing some guys into some situations where you find out, like taking basically a baby and throwing him in the deep end of the pool, and let's see if he can sink or swim. Let's see what we have in some of these guys, because there is a definite reality that Jeff Okudah, who can certainly be the talent that he can be a starting corner opposite AJ Terrell, and certainly probably looks to be the starting corner when he gets back. And hopefully it'll be sooner than later, and he'll be part of our starting lineup here for, umpteen weeks or what have you, line up against the opposite side of AJ Terrell. Hopefully that he's a guy who can be a big time player in this defense. But until then, let me see what I've got in some of these guys. Let me see what I have in, again, Clark Phillips, Mike Hughes, Trey Flowers to a degree, D. Alford, Cornell Armstrong is another guy. Let's see what we have in some of these guys. These guys are still really young. They don't have a ton of experience. Armstrong has not played a whole lot, obviously. He got and by the way, Armstrong got thrown into a bad situation last year, a horrible situation. Oh yeah, go line up against Jamar Chase because we don't have our starting corner. That's not an ideal scenario. That's the difference between sinking and swimming, and I'm just going to put a gun to your head and pull the trigger with loaded 357. Like that's a no-win situation at that point. And by the way, as the season went on, he actually held his own. He actually played better as the season went along. So let's see what we have in some of these guys, because again, we might have to figure out some things for the long term down the road, even a year or two from now. And let's see what we have in some of these guys. Injury is leading to opportunity. Hope some guys take advantage of this opportunity that's presented to them. All right, as you listen in to Hittin' Hard, make sure that you leave us a comment on whatever podcast platform that you're listening to us on, and let us know that you're an everyday listener to the program. We like to call them our everydayers, and we do thank you so much for being a part of our community. But let us know that you're an everydayer. You're listening in 5 days a week to the program. So two names we're not really hearing a whole lot about for the Falcons. One is on the offensive side, one's on the defensive side. So first off, on the offensive side of things is Jalen Mayfield. Now, Jalen Mayfield, when we last saw him play, was having the worst season as an interior offensive lineman in the entirety of the NFL. He was literally the worst offensive lineman in the entirety of the NFL. Now, fast forward here a couple of years later, and he's back at tackle. So he's going back to his natural position, where he was forced into being the left guard because of injuries to it. But he's going back to tackle. And let's see what he's got. Again, obviously McGarry is the starting right tackle. I'm not concerned about that. But if something happens, can Mayfield handle the job? Can he get his career back on track after what was a disastrous rookie year that he was thrown into a bad situation? Again, we talk about situations. That wasn't a matter of sink or swim. That was, hey, you've never played this position. We have injuries, and go get him, big fella. So part of that wasn't fair. but he also didn't adapt to the position, or he didn't really get that much better. But again, we can argue those semantics or what have you, but he's a guy that we're not hearing a whole lot about so far on the offensive line. And that's because, again, I know he's a rotational player, but come Miami, well, first off, come practices, let's see what he can do in these joint practices, because the joint practices, to be honest with you, that'll be more important than probably the game itself. We'll learn probably more in the joint practices than we're going to learn in a preseason game against the Dolphins, because it's going to be first preseason game. It's going to be probably very vanilla, but there'll be some hitting and some competition. And again, both coaches talked about this. The coach for the Dolphins and Arthur Smith both talked about the idea of, guys seizing opportunity and getting at it and, making a name for themselves or what have you, because even the Dolphins coach talked about the idea of, hey, we're not only watching our guys, but we're going to watch their guys as well, because there may be a guy that gets cut or what have you that we may look at him to pick him up. And familiarity would be a key in this, where, okay, we've seen him play against some of our guys. So again, both these teams are going to be looking at different guys and things like that, not just their own guys, but potentially some other guys that are going to be out there. So again, Mayfield is a guy who we haven't seen him in a while since his rookie year. I want to see a good bit of him. I want to see him play a lot against this, Dolphins defensive line. And I want to see him, if he just looks, even if we don't learn about everything that we need to know, does he look more comfortable? Is he comfortable back at his natural position? Has he learned from his time after his rookie year? Like, all of these things, I want to kind of see out of Jalen Mayfield, and let's see what we have in him. Now, on the defensive side of the football, one name that we're really not hearing about is Bud Dupree, who obviously has had a lot of success in the NFL, but it does feel like in some ways he's being looked as an afterthought. We're not hearing his name come up as far as all these spectacular plays in practice or this or that or whatever like that. He's just going about his business. And maybe that's the profile that he's, setting right now. But obviously, as we look at pass rush and we look at Ebiketie and Caden Ellis and Lorenzo Carter and, D'Angelo Malone and, the cavalcade of, stars that we have to, figure out a way to sack the quarterback, Calais Campbell or what have you, that cavalcade group of guys that, we need to sack the quarterback. But Dupree's just been kind of like, there. Now, I've talked to some people that they feel like that, he may not end up making it when all is said and done. He's not had injuries, but, he may not make it when all of this becomes through and comes to fruition, and he may not make the active roster. But as of right now, again, he's another guy that I know what kind of player that he is. I'm not asking him to, show me something that he isn't. We've seen enough of Bud Dupree in his career that we know the kind of player that he is. But is he still the impact player that he was a handful of years ago? Is he still that kind of player? Can he still make an impact? If he goes out there as part of a rotation of guys, and he's lining up against, a lot of your back end guys, I want to see if he can make an impact on a play, because we really haven't heard. Again, he's the guy on the defensive side that we really haven't talked a whole lot about. Talked about their secondary, talked about Caden Ellis, talked about Ebiketie, talked a lot about all these different guys, Onyemata and Calais Campbell and everybody, who, by the way, is back now with the Falcons, taking on the taking off the pup list, and again, passed his physical, and he's ready to rock and roll. And I don't plan to see him at all in preseason. In fact, I would hope that they don't even play him in preseason at this point. Again, 15 years in the league, he doesn't need preseason football to get himself ready. So I don't care about all of that. But I would like to see some Bud Dupree. I would like to see him in his defensive scheme, see if he can get some of that magic that he had in years past, see if he can figure out some things and kind of get his career back on track. It's not like he's fallen off a cliff, but he hasn't been the same impact player that he has been in the past. So he's on the defensive side of the football that I wouldn't mind seeing what he can do here coming up this week against the Dolphins as we get ready for Friday. And we'll talk more about the game as we get into all of that here this week. But we're going to certainly watch these practices that are coming up, these practices with the Dolphins, because, again, we'll probably learn a lot more from that than we will actually them playing in the game on Friday night. All right, well, thank you so much for making Hittin' Hard your first listen. Be sure to go in and leave us a comment on whatever podcast platform that you listen on. Let us know that you're an everyday listener to the program. What I call them our everydayers, and we thank you so much for being a part of our community. We ask you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Get the latest episodes of Hittin' Hard as soon as they become available. Also, check us out on the Sirius XM app as well, and give me a follow on my personal Twitter page at JMCH316. Back with you tomorrow. This has been Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery, Locked On Sports Atlanta.